To start us off, we are going to have Arabic recitation by Sheikh Muka Sabi, who is an engineer. He also teaches Quranic school right across the way here at ISBCC for weekend school. He is out of Rhode Island. He went to Northeastern University, and he's from Libya.
وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وعيسى وأيوب ويونس وهارون وسليمان وآتينا داود زبورا ورسلا قد قصصناهم عليك من قبل ورسلا لم نقصصهم عليك. Reflections to talk about Allah Azza wa Jalla, that God revealed to the Noah and the other prophets, Moses, Jesus, all the prophets, and Allah Azza wa Jalla talked to Moses, peace be upon him, and we have to believe all the prophets of God.
Allah bless our efforts and make us successful, and grant us the best of this life and the next, and make this life a source of abundance for every good, and make death a source of comfort and not grief. O Allah, let us be a nation that encourages justice and forbids injustice. O Allah, make us examples for our nation, and make our nation an example of justice for all humanity to emulate. Ameen.
And to my immediate left, we have Dr. Rodney Peterson, who's going to give us a Christian opening.
Grace is costly because it obliges us to honor the continuous work of God in the world and compels us to recognize the intrinsic God-likeness present in all creation. In this way, we are enabled to overcome the breakdown of dialogue that exists between diverse and polarized groups of people. Grace is the lens through which we pray, through which we see as sacred what has been deemed ordinary and obscure by the world. Grace humbles us to perceive as blessed what the world has made marginalized, disinherited, and oppressed. Thus, grace is what compels us to live the gospel truth, that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves, to do justice unto the least of these, heal the brokenhearted and the wounded, and set free those who are oppressed in need of liberty.
Mark Gervis, who is the Executive Vice President of the Jewish Federations of North America, and he's going to give us a Jewish prayer.
Okay, let me correct. I'm not the Executive Vice President of the Jewish Federation. I'm from Jewish Voice for Peace, Boston.
Okay.
Have mercy on us, fulfill your promise to us as you have written. I shall give peace upon the earth, and you shall fear nothing. The sword shall never come upon your land, justice shall roll down like the water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. May the earth be filled with truth, wisdom, and love, as the waters fill the seas. Amen.
I'm Latoya Malone. I'm the president of the Muslim Student Association, and I'm honored and humbled and privileged and excited to be part of such a dynamic event that we have planned for today. Ultimately, we have more in common than we do differences. Today, just by being here, you've proved this fact, and we'd like to thank you for coming out.
I would also like to thank the president, faculty, Muslim Student Association, Roxbury Community College, for their hospitality in hosting this conference. We give thanks to our invited panelists for answering the call and coming to share their views and struggles, as well as those who are here to give support.
This conference for this year is a little bit different from the 32 conferences that we did in Massachusetts and other states. Islamic Council of New England is an umbrella organization that include Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. I want to thank our communication chair of the council that Dr. Abdulqadir Asmal, I think he's somewhere here, that he was able to get 9 panelists that you're going to see all of them here after I finish talk. And through the first session, inshallah, everyone would take his chance of addressing the theme of the conference.
The Holy Quran speaks of the need for groups and tribes to know each other in order that they may not despise each other. And we are all aware that there are various forms of oppression that exist in the world. However, today, I will address the plight of the oppressed group that I am most familiar with and that I am a part of. An early definition of justice puts forth the concept of the exercise of authority in the vindication of right by assigning reward and or punishment, thereby indicating the existence of a victim, a perpetrator, a judge, and a verdict. The Quran states that the most horrendous injustice that can be meted out to an individual or group is that of oppression. The Quran states that death is preferable to oppression. Individuals and groups so often find it easy to be just to those close to them, such as kindred or those considered intimate acquaintances, but find it difficult to extend the same level of fairness to those considered the other, the outsider, or the stranger. There are now more black males in prison than there were enslaved on plantations prior to and during the Civil War. Thousands of people of African descent were killed in violent public acts of racial content and domination, and the perpetrators were never held accountable. The state of Black America is a political and moral embarrassment to the nation, both at home and abroad, leaving the United States open to charges of racism internally and hypocrisy abroad.
Probably it hasn't reached a lot of us in here yet. There's been an active shooter situation in Pittsburgh at a synagogue up there, the Tree of Life Synagogue. There are 8 reported dead. It seems like the shooter is now in custody. But I'd like us to take a moment and collectively pray for the congregation there, for the survivors, for the victims, for their families, for peace and justice within this incredibly challenging and divisive moment within that town's history and that of the people there. So if we can just take a moment of silence. So under the category of grievances and concerns, obviously I'm coming here as a representative of a Muslim advocacy and Islamophobia prevention organization and combating organization. I don't believe personally that you can contain anger and evil. I don't believe that you can have targeted and strategic hatred targeting only one minority group. I believe that any time you license hatred toward any one group, it spills out inevitably onto others. There's always friendly fire, there are always civilian casualties with this kind of combat. There's no such thing as a clean swipe against Muslims. You're always going to activate animosity toward the Jewish community, toward the African American community, the LGBTQ community, the Hispanic community, the Asian communities, and every other visible and invisible minority group within our country. What we see more and more is an attempt to delegitimize, de-license, and minimize publicity of the faith of Islam and the practice of Islam and visible Muslims within our society. It is okay to change one's name, to not be practicing in public, to not be visibly immigrant, to have an accent, to have a skin of a certain color. But as soon as those things enter into the public sphere, as soon as they extend beyond the private, as soon as prayer extends beyond the home or the mosque, then it becomes somehow intrusive or something that needs to be de-licensed or delegitimized within the public realm. So as soon as Islam, quote-unquote, rears its head in that way, this is exactly when we see the harshest pushback. These are the moments in which we see that trampling down. Or whether it is young Muslim boys who are having their heads routinely shoved into lockers whenever they decide to wear kufis, as we've seen in the Randolph School District, or simply walking around being visibly Muslim and wearing a headscarf. The net impact of this is to attempt to internalize this faith among a larger a larger segment of the population. It is the attempt to say that you can only be American as long as you are visibly none of these things which would segregate or visibly identify you with your faith. And the more that we hear that messaging, the more that Muslims are exposed to that, I fear, the more that it will internalize that faith within their own identities. So when we talk about grievances, what we're seeing more and more is that Islam is becoming a delegitimized religion, that it's seen as somehow other or different or separate from other faiths, that when Muslims go into the public eye, for example, we have activists such as Nisar Soor, we have politicians such as Keith Ellison, or more recently Rashid Talib or Ilhan Omar, these people immediately become under the crosshairs and under the crossfire of a significant level of pushback. Anybody who's followed social media for these figures knows the incredible power that is leveled against anyone who puts their head up, that it's immediately just a very significant level of pushback, death threats, Twitter storm, for example, having to shut down Facebook accounts, having to fear for one's public safety. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So during that exact moment of walking through the valley of the shadow of death, we're simultaneously told of an anointment, a blessing, and that's what I hope we're here to receive today from this interfaith gathering. Thank you.
We'll pass the microphone. Thank you very much, Dr. Roberts. To Reverend Rodney Peterson.
I'm a Presbyterian minister, PCUSA. I am the executive director of Cooperative Metropolitan Ministries, and I've done a lot of other things too. I want to raise 3 points. When we marginalize someone, how much do we cut out? I want to take for our thinking here the book by Donna Hicks, a social political psychologist, called Dignity, as she draws from the psychologist Jean Piaget about identity. To be a self requires an other. One way of reading history is to see it as the reconciliation of opposites. Sexual opposites, racial opposites, other demographics. The problem is that when we posit a sense of ourself, we inevitably posit another and other. That other can be a challenge or a blessing. If a blessing, we grow and we prosper. If a challenge, we shut down and become subject to tribalism. That's much of what we see going on in North America and around the world today. So when we turn to the problem of immigration today, and especially the separation of families, what is it we are saying about families as we cut families to the quick? Or what is it when we cut out religion from our schools and so end up with lack of purpose, despair, and loss of meaning? What is it when we cut out the role of government and lose its role and become subject to increasing selfishness? These 3 points all relate to the question of how we marginalize the other. Thank you.
I'm Martine Perhat from Catholic Charities, and I just first want to give my sincere thanks to the organizing committee for allowing me to be part of this really amazing event and to be among such distinguished colleagues. I'm a little in awe. And third, I do need to warn you that I'm not a scholar or theologian, but what I am is somebody whose faith does inform the work I do. And the work that I do is being a mainstream ally to those who are marginalized. And it is the social justice teaching on migration that guides the work that we do. So what is it that I actually do? I am fortunate to be the director of Catholic Charities for the Archdiocese of Boston Refugee and Immigration Services Division. We don't ask if you're Catholic, we ask, are you hungry? we ask, do you need support? The majority of the people served in our programs, when we sit back and look at it, whether it be immigration services, resettlement services, basic needs, adult education, are immigrants or are the children of immigrants. And actually, when we think about it, this should not really be a surprise. With the exception of our Native American brothers and sisters, all of us were at one time immigrants. Over the past 115 years, Catholic Charities has grown into one of the largest service agencies in the Commonwealth, with 75 programs in 26 locations. When I further reflect 115 years later, as a nation, we unfortunately seem to be reversing back in time, or maybe we have not really moved forward. That would require a much longer conversation than we have time for today. So from where I sit, it seems that we have lost our religion in our nation, and I will give a few examples of such from the work that we do. We see every day how immigrants and refugees are blamed for the evils of society. Midterm polls indicate that people believe immigrants are taking their jobs, despite the fact that the national unemployment rate is 3.7%. We have leaders creating fake news, saying that people from the Middle East are walking among thousands of miles in caravans of women and children who are seeking a life away from the plague of gang violence and poverty in Central America. Seriously? I'll be honest, I know nothing about terrorists or gangs or their motivation, but I cannot believe they would walk thousands of miles with little food or water to reach a border that will likely reject them or separate them from their children and eventually just incarcerate everyone like criminals. I'll share a fact from the UNHCR. Let's take a moment to visualize a reality. One person is displaced every 2 seconds. So I adhere to my allotted time of 10 minutes. 300 people will be gathering their belongings, saying goodbye to loved ones, and fleeing their home and life as they know it by the time I've concluded these remarks. That is staggering. And then there is one of the worst atrocities in my 23 years of doing this work that I have witnessed. This administration going further than any other, forcibly separating families whose only crime was to seek safety and opportunity for their children. We have worked with those parents and children who were reunited after being separated for over 3 months. One four-year-old child's question haunts me. She said to us, "Papi left me." She looked at her father and said, "Papi, why did you leave me? Papi, why do you not love me?" They were separated for almost 4 months. The church's teachings are clear on why we must support and welcome. And if the writings of popes and theologians are not enough, there's always the Bible, which is quite definitive. Unfortunately, the message does not permeate in all of our parishes. My fervent hope is for all Catholics to realize that migration and immigration policies that protect and lift up our life issues. A consistent ethic of life can not only be in infancy, it must be from birth through death. Shutting out and scapegoating others, not giving a people a chance to make a living for themselves and their families is a life issue. I will end my remarks here, and I look forward to our next session, where we can talk about some solutions, and I promise to be a little more upbeat.
To the organizers, to ICNE and the MSA and RCC. I also want to thank you, Dr. Robbins, for letting us know about this active shooter situation in Pittsburgh. I had not heard about it before we got on the stage, so that is on my mind, and just appreciate you bringing that to our attention. So yes, my name is Liza Barron. I am involved in Jewish Voice for Peace Boston, and I serve on the coordinating committee, coordinating our work to counter Islamophobia, to counter anti-Muslim violence. So I was initially thinking I would speak about Islamophobia, about why it is so urgent for all of us to combat, but I think that Dr. Malik and Dr. Robbins have been doing a really good job covering that, so I figured I might shift a little bit to focus more on anti-Semitism and how that fits in with everything we are talking about today. And specifically how anti-Semitism intersects with Islamophobia and racism under systems of white supremacy. So why that matters, I think often, anti-Semitism is not in the center of conversations about oppression on the left, and I think that makes sense. But I think the reason it is important to incorporate it into this conversation is, I think there's a few reasons. One, anti-Semitism is happening, it's growing, we all know that, under the Trump administration. Second, it strengthens all of our coalitions and movements. The more broad we can be and the more we can bring in various communities.
I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you to the organizers, all of the attendees, and to my colleagues and comrades that I know at this table, and to new faces and colleagues here as well. When we talk about issues of Blackness, and I will say that we're talking about the intersections of multiple peoples who are now within North America, the boundaries of the nation state, the United States of America, who are descendants of the Africans who were enslaved across the Americas, as well as those who are immigrants that have come. So there is a multiplicity. I think it's important to say, as a representative of Black Lives Matter, as a person of African descent, given the work that we do, that our situatedness in North America calls us to be concerned about the well-being and the safety and flourishing of all Black lives. That includes the lives of men and women, LGBTQ persons, the non-binary persons, transgender persons, children, and youth. Black peoples in North America include those who are immigrants, as I've said, and some who are refugees, some documented and undocumented. Why am I saying this? I think it's important when we talk about interfaith conversations, we tend to privilege and give supremacy to the Abrahamic traditions. And that is very important to make legible in name. But when we talk about justice and democracy and inclusivity, and the traditional trope nowadays is to talk about diversity and inclusion. When we talk about broader ideas of human dignity, concepts of solidarity, and I might have said justice, who are we privileging within our conversations? And also, who are rendered marginal to the margins, right? And so our task as a social movement is to reimagine the humanity and the dignity of all persons who have been erased, dehumanized, and subjugated through white supremacy in the legacy of the United States of America and beyond. And so I think what I want to put on the table and begin to talk about, there is a plethora of ways in which grievances are emerging in a new way. The prison industrial complex is not new. It is the old plantocracy, and Michelle Alexander tells us it is the new Jim Crow, right? Gentrification begins to reinscribe Jim Crow also in a different way with different valences. So I want in the next section to talk about our analyses and the ways in which Black Lives Matter approach not only making legible the dignity and the contributions and the genius of Black peoples that have always been, but also how we imagine being human and how we understand and reimagine concepts that founding fathers never imagined, such as democracy and justice and humanity. Thank you.
My name is Michael Prentice. I am a lifelong resident of this neighborhood. I was actually born in the Boston City Hospital, raised in Mission Hill projects. Have not made it very far, geographically at least. Happy to be here. Happy to share space with so many informed and passionate individuals, and hopefully we can contribute something useful toward pushing this conversation forward throughout the day, and hopefully this day will be the start of a longer union. I'm here to talk about sort of the Black Community Information Center, a brief sort of overview of the organization, and then also to give you an idea of the framework in which we approach the conversation and hopefully what we can contribute to this ongoing discussion. And so the mission of the Black Community Information Center historically is to create independent platforms, to create and disseminate information and analysis that would contribute to the liberation of Black people. The roots of the organization comes from the sort of hundreds of Black people who came together in the 1970s, the dark ages in our neighborhood, so to speak, to form community alternatives to a lot of the violence and the problems plaguing our community then and now. And so we see that the federal government, we beseech them for these solutions, and they have failed us since the time of 1860s. We see them failing to enforce their own laws and creating a safe environment for Black Americans to make their will known on the ballot, leading to the 1965 Civil Rights Act. We see the failure of the government today in Roxbury in the Carson and Walsh administration to preserve our community and to make resources available for us to solve the problems of community violence and what we're now calling the Great Displacement. And so we at the Black Community Information Center strive to continue to create these independent platforms for Black people to continue to learn about and analyze the cages that we're put in on various social levels. So hopefully we can continue to bring that local perspective. Hopefully we can translate a lot of this great history and a lot of these great concepts to make them useful to the people in Roxbury. And of course create a model that can go beyond this neighborhood, beyond this city, and maybe even beyond this nation.
My name is Luz Zambrano, and I'm the co-founder and co-director of the Center to Support Immigrant Organizing. I am from Colombia. I have lived in this country since 1990, 28 years. I was invited to talk about the Latino community, even though I work with most immigrants in Boston. I was invited to talk about the Latino community, being Latino. So for me, one of the concerns and one of the grievances that I have is that when we talk about immigration, we just talk about what is going on here inside the country, but we never question why their people are coming here and how the influence in the intervention of this country is creating the problem. I am from Colombia myself. I came in 1990, and I came because of the same reason. President Nixon gave money to my country because they wanted supposedly to do a war in drugs. And that money never finished, as you say, the drugs. It's still the same, or more strong than ever. But that money was put in the hands of people that control the land. And we here in the United States, we benefit from that. We benefit from cheap bananas, we benefit from cheap coffee. We never question why we are benefiting from all of that. Why other people in other countries are suffering. The ones that actually are cultivating those bananas, they are actually the ones that are cultivating that coffee. Why they are suffering, why they are coming to this country. So my grievances, especially to people that want to be allies to the immigrant community, is to really understand the history and the stories of the people, to see how the foreign policy of this country is influencing the global South, and why for example, I had to come here, and I just wanted to illustrate my own story, because I think we need to know that when I graduated from university, the unemployment, it was 52%. So when you graduate and you have all these hopes as a 21-year-old person, and you look around and you don't find a job, and you know that your family is struggling, what you do? What you do with that energy, with all the things that you know, is just to look for a better life and try to go to the country that is actually pushing you out from your country. The problem of immigration is not just inside of the United States. The problem of immigration is coming from this country and the policies and the intervention that they are having in our countries. And I really feel sometimes that, as most people here say, the white supremacy, it is a global illness. And that is in the back of everything that is happening. Immigration, anti-Islamic, anti-Semitism, everything.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to the point of our sister who spoke about the America as being an attraction point to the immigrants. If America is an attraction point to many of us, what would this panel do to make sure that people don't get attracted so much to America by probably boosting the economy or helping their political system? What would this panel do, or what does it think is the plan to help those and stop them from coming, please? Thank you.
That is a big question, but mainly for me, as I said, most people, if they have the right conditions in their countries, if they have an economy that actually give them the opportunity to work, and our resources are not taken away, if we have a good healthcare and we have the right conditions, we will stay there. So I really think that if we actually here we can question this country and the foreign policies that they have in our countries, like globalization, the free trade agreements, all of that. The only thing that had happened is just impoverish our countries. And it seems like when they talk about it that it is going to be something that our countries can sell things and we can better our economies, when it's actually untrue. So I think that is something that maybe other people that maybe are economists or something have an answer. But as a regular person, I don't see it as a big monster.
One, remember history. Two, don't hate. And three, don't be a bystander. Remember history, don't hate, don't be a bystander.
Mental health, poverty, the present industrialized system.
And your strategy?
Bismillah. In the beginning, the middle, and the end. The three that we would tackle would be mental health, poverty, and the prison system, the private industrial. And the strategy would be one, forming small communities or committees to come together under the umbrella of mental health to gather a group of mental health professionals to go into homes of people that we identified to help do some type of psychotherapy and trauma work. Another committee would work on creating opportunities of going to different funders or private industries to create opportunities for employment.
Identify yourself, please. I'm sorry. I didn't ask that one.
Kevin Elmer from RCC. So after much discussion, in order to keep suspense, I'm going to go from 3 to 2 to 1. Okay, so number 3 for us was addressing urban economics and social issues. Number 2 for us was trying to facilitate community relations and the lack of networking among coalitions, especially this possible coalition here. And our number one was the problem of institutional racism, because it seems to touch upon all these other areas. And our strategy, after much discussion, was that we should start and think in the local level, and then move to the state, national, and then the global perspective.
My name is Murstaba, and our 3 important issues are building capital within the community, recognizing equal rights within the community, and fighting racism. So, in red against, or our first step is by regularly meeting with members of the local community, not just to listen to hear people speak, but to go out and actively engage with the greater area in order to foster relations between the local and like the greater communities. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. What does building capital mean?
Capital means more than just money. It means human capital through education, by educating members of the community and talking with them. It means personal capital, such as training members of the community through self-discipline, meditation, and even physical activity, and other forms of capital, such as social capital, which is, in my view, the most important to ending racism, because when the Muslim community has a high social capital with the greater community, that means it's held in high esteem, which reduces incidents of violence against Muslims. Isolation breeds alienation, and something that's alien is obviously scary, and we hate what we are scared of. So.
The three kind of regrouped in central issues were education, power, and othering, marginalizing versus community. And our plan.
And we decided that one of the most important steps would be education, because racism is in the educational system, and we teach our children from when they're very young all the way through college that there is an otherness. And so we need to change the system of education so that we can begin to bring about a real awareness and touch the hearts of people. You know, we create monsters, so how can we recreate humanism?
Could you break down just a little bit what's otherness as a problem?
Well, the theme here has been, one theme is marginalization versus mainstream. So you're on one side or the other. We walk through different current U.S. groups, African Americans, Hispanics, whites. We don't hear much about East Asian people, but they're certainly in there as well. Native folks, Hispanic folks. So we're in our different camps. I am white man, I am other than all y'all African American women, right? Well, maybe, but I'm human too, believe it or not, so are you. So that's other.
Yeah, it sounds like the whole objectification of human beings make them not like me, and that often leads to violence. More than marginalization, it often leads to violence. Okay, panel.
Hi, I'm Michael Felsen. I'm with Boston Workmen's Circle, and we had a very vigorous discussion about what the top three would be, so we actually didn't even get to strategy, believe it or not. But our number one would be reparations and racial justice. Number two would be education, which would include creating access, using popular education, and disrupting the current school curriculum. And number three would be economic justice. So obviously our three have a lot of resonances with many of the others that you raised already. And I won't presume to say what our strategy would have been, since we didn't actually get to that. But maybe education will be part of that, and reaching out to the community.
Yeah, our gift in this group was recognizing that we needed a lot of conversation to be clear, and that was, as a coalition, a first step, because we're not used to talking to each other and understanding our individual vantage points and how we're thinking and what we're thinking. So perhaps the first strategy that we would do is to actually build relationship, right? But I wanted to actually clarify this idea of otherness came out of dominant culture, imagining, creating a standard and a hierarchy of humanity, right? And then everybody outside of that, and it was white, male, propertied, land-owning classes of people who had power to enforce who was in and who were out. So typically, the idea of otherness has emerged, and it can involve other people reinscribing, but the struggle for reimagination of what it means to be human by people who are subjugated is a righteous struggle. And so then to be pro-Black, pro-immigrant, pro-woman, pro-LGBTQ and trans people isn't to other those who are historically have been oppressing and dominating and benefiting from that, but it is to say we too are human and fully human as everyone else. I think that's really important to understand because it shuts down the voices of those who have been historically othered and marginalized.
You know, it's something that I've been involved in Democratic Party politics for many, many decades, and every candidate has asked this question, including President Obama, and they say, oh, you know, it's not realistic. But I think, and this is where faith comes in, I personally believe, and I think if you are a believer in Scripture and the paradigm that puts forth, that we have a tremendous amount of moral capital in the labor and the discrimination and the abuse that our ancestors suffered.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, in the Atlantic Monthly, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, wrote one of the best short reads. It's not a book, but it's in between the book, a short article. It's called The Case for Reparations. You can Google it. And what Ta-Nehisi does is that he connects the struggle not only to slavery, but to sharecropping, to redlining, to the kind of contracts that, particularly in Chicago, that were given to blacks, and that we're living with the direct effects. You know, people like to put slavery like we're living with the direct effects. So I recommend Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Hi, I'm Sajida. What was the first one? Race, religion, and education. But I think, like personally, I think race is the biggest one, and it's not the problem that there is race in that, like, we identify as different people. It's that people aren't giving credit when it's due. And a lot of people think that Black history starts, like, with slavery, but Black people were kings and queens, and a lot of the system is built against Black people. And then a lot of the things that we have done, like our achievements, are taken or given, like, we haven't been given credit for the things that we've done and the successes that we've had. And it's always seen as the negative that Black people done. That's what the media portrays. That's what, like, so it's like, if that's what's constantly being fed to you, why wouldn't you act that way? Why wouldn't you, if you're constantly being told every day that the only thing you can do is go to a prison, or you can go to a bad school, you're not meant to graduate, you're not meant to have a better life, or your people aren't meant to have better lives, then what's the point of even trying? Like, if that's what you think your path is, ultimately, there's no point in trying.
I hadn't been on the earlier panels, but something that I have been thinking about before this evening, and that strikes me as being something that I would like to share because it's very meaningful to me, and hopefully encapsulates a lot of what has been discussed today, is actually the last paragraph of Barack Obama's speech at the University of Cairo in 2009, and I just would like to read this quickly. All of us share this world for but a brief moment in time. The question is whether we spend that time focused on what pushes us apart, or whether we commit ourselves to an effort, a sustained effort, to find common ground, to focus on the future we seek for our children, and to respect the dignity of all human beings. It's easier to start wars than to end them. It's easier to blame others than to look inward. It's easier to see what is different about someone than to find the things we share. But we should choose the right path, not just the easy path. There's one rule that lies at the heart of every religion, that we do unto others as we would have them do unto us. This truth transcends nations and peoples, a belief that isn't new. It isn't black or white or brown. It isn't Christian or Muslim or Jew. It's a belief that pulsed in the cradle of civilization and that still beats in the hearts of billions around the world. It's a faith in other people, and it's what brought me here today. That was our former President, Barack Obama.
I've learned a lot today, to be quite honest with you. I don't normally have a chance to think at this level in the day-to-day work that we do with charities. So I guess I'm very encouraged. There were so many different views, but everybody was coming together in a spirit of wanting to make change and wanting to make a difference. And so that gives me a lot of hope. And that's something I think some of us can be in short supply of these days. So I'm very hopeful, and I look forward to being part of the continued conversation, God willing.
People that you should expect the best from yourselves and those around you, and know that at the end that you will be victorious. I can't, and it sounds corny, but this is what my parents told me, so my coaches told me, and my teachers told me, and it held me in good stead. You have to think that you're special. You don't want to be equal, you want to be special. You want to be better, you want to be the best. And that's what I exceptionalism. Thank you.
We just don't want to make the mistakes, just by calling ourselves a name doesn't mean that we're going to end up doing the right thing. I mean, and you should be a reader, you should be concerned about what's going on around you, because in order to be a social change agent, you need to know a little bit about self and a little bit about other people. Thank you so very much, and I've learned a lot today. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all.
I thank the panel for today. I also thank the organizers. I thank Dr. Jim Jones for coming from Connecticut, and all of our other moderators for today. All of our sponsors and all of you who have taken out your time, effort, and energy in this weather and brought such light into the room. I also like to thank Roxbury Community College and the RCC MSA for sponsoring us in making this an economical event. The reason your banquet tickets are so low is because RCC helped to offset what they call over $4,000 investment in making this reality for us. And if we all had to shoulder part of that, it would not be a doable event for many of us to attend. So the reason we have the diversity and the love in the room is because of these kinds of supports, and we want to acknowledge them and continue on with the food for thought for this evening for the banquet.
Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the Islamic Council of New England, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation to the conference committee for their excellent professionalism on a job well done in organizing one of the best dawah promotions in the history of the council. The theme in itself, Voices of Marginalized Americans and Their Mainstream Allies, clearly allow the harnessing of organizations that would not ordinarily communicate with each other. The success of the conference came directly from the wisdom of our panelists. Their in-depth research and insight, combined with questions and concerns from our attendees, resulted in a significant step towards social change. Special thanks and appreciation to our chair, Brother Naeem Asel, Program Director, Dr. Asmal Khader, Mistress of Ceremony, Sister Latifa Ali, President, Roxbury Community College, MSA, Latoya Malone, Treasurer of Roxbury Community College, MSA, Brother Ahmed Hamilton. Without these individual commitments and dedication, the task would have been very difficult. We thank those who attend the conference and any who took the time to watch and listen to this program. May God Almighty bless everyone, open their hearts, and give support to the building and promotion of this coalition. Ameen.